Welcome back to Grace Notes. Today I want to take you on a journey that's both ancient and urgent. A journey through the Exodus plagues and the Passover that leaves us standing in the presence of a God who is neither distant nor accidental. Have you ever read that story and felt the hairs on your arms stand up because it's more than history, it's heaven speaking? That's what this theological reflection is about. Seeing the plagues and the Passover not as random phenomena, but as a purposeful revelation of God's supremacy, His justice, and His mercy. Think for a moment about Pharaoh's Egypt, a world full of gods and idols, voices that promise power, security, and meaning. Into that noise God speaks through Moses and Aaron, not with whispers, but with a deliberate campaign that exposes the emptiness of false gods. Each plague hits a specific stronghold of Egyptian belief. The Nile turned to blood, when their river god is supposed to sustain life. Darkness that swallows their sun god. Locusts that starve their agricultural gods. God was making a point. There is only one Lord, and He is the world's true authority. Does that challenge the little gods you lean on? Money, influence, comfort, reputation? Are there idols you still trust more than God? What grips me most is how methodical God was. This wasn't chaos. It was calculated truth-telling. God's purposes were threefold: to reveal His supremacy, to judge hollow idols, and to liberate His people. He wasn't simply reacting. He was acting to fulfill covenant promises and to free a people who had been bound for generations. When we feel powerless, when the systems around us crush, it's worth asking, whose power are we witnessing? Are we seeing human authority, or are we seeing something that ultimately bends the knee to God's sovereignty? And then there is the climactic moment, the 10th plague and the Passover. The scene is raw and holy. Instructions to take a perfect lamb, apply its blood, eat in haste, mark the doorway. Life or death hung on obedience. That's not a small image. The blood on the doorposts was a visible act of faith, a chosen trust that put the household under God's protection. It was both terrifying and tender. It said, "We believe you, God. We will follow your way, even when it doesn't make sense on paper." What are we willing to trust God about in our own lives when the stakes feel just as high? Listen to this. The Passover isn't just an Old Testament event to memorialize, it's a prophetic shadow of Christ. The unblemished lamb, the applied blood, the meal that remembers and proclaims deliverance, all point to Jesus, the ultimate Passover lamb. When Paul writes that Christ is our Passover, he's telling us the story didn't end in Egypt. It crescendos in Calvary and the empty tomb. If the Israelites' faith in an applied sacrifice spared them from death, what does it mean for us that Christ's blood covers our sin? How deeply do you believe in that substitutionary love that stands between you and judgment? There's another urgent lesson here. The danger of a hardened heart. Pharaoh's stubbornness started small and grew until it became the posture of his nation. Repeated refusal made him less responsive to God, less willing to yield, and finally, more subject to judgment. That's a mirror for every one of us. Each time we ignore God's voice, we make it a little easier to ignore Him the next time. Where in your life are you leaning into your own understanding instead of God's word? What prideful decisions are hardening your heart? But the story does not leave us in despair. The Passover reveals God's dual nature, holy and merciful. Judgment fell on the unprotected, yes, but a substitute was provided, a way of escape. That is the gospel in miniature. God's justice cannot be trampled, but His mercy makes a way. The call is active. Apply the blood. Obey the instructions. Step into the freedom God provides. Are you living as someone who's been covered and set free? Or are you still carrying burdens you were meant to leave at the door? I want this to be a conversation, not a monologue. How has the Exodus narrative reshaped your view of God's power and mercy? In what ways do you need to stop trusting the false comforts of our age and start trusting the one who proved himself over every so-called God? Please share your thoughts in the comment area. Your story might be the exact encouragement someone else needs. If this reflection touched you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the Metropolitan Baptist Church YouTube channel so you don't miss other Grace Notes episodes. If you're hungry to go deeper, the full sermon series is linked in the description below. Watch it, study it, and let it refine the way you see God's work in the world. Until next time, may your heart be softened, your faith strengthened, and your life marked by the one whose power brings judgment for sin and mercy for those who trust him. Share what God is doing in you in the comments. Let's walk this out together.